Feels weird getting back into it. You know, you sit yourself out for so long, be it procrastination or whatever, and now you have to finally come back and do it all over. Anyway, welcome to Storytime Playthroughs, and I'm looking to finally start setting up a schedule. And for today, this would normally be a gameplay day, but we're kind of shifting things along, and we're gonna treat this as like a Monday, even though it's Tuesday. And we're gonna be doing movie reviews. And so there's one big one, an older one, and a TV show I wanted to talk about. So let's get right into it. Heading over to the theater room. And we're gonna get rid of this one and switch it out for a much better poster, because we're gonna start things off with, I believe, the current, supposedly a box office record smasher, and that is the latest from Disney and Marvel Studios. Where'd you go? Poster? Come here. No, I want the poster. Oh Lord, the scuff has already started. Come here. Okay, come on. So big. He is so big. Okay. Poster, you come. Trying to get you small. Need you small. There we go. Shang Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. No spoilers for this one, obviously, because it just came out. But I did want to discuss my thoughts on it after going deep into the MCU over when I talked about Loki. And I gotta say that Shang-Chi definitely skyrocketed up to one of my favorites in the MCU, and definitely one of the top 5 of the year, for sure. But let me get my notes out. And I think we're ready to get started. So, if you're not familiar with the character, and it's not surprising that you wouldn't be, because this is a very deep cut for Marvel. When it comes to martial arts and Marvel, normally you get the characters from the Netflix shows. You get Iron Fist, you get Daredevil, and The Hand, and Elektra. Those characters are much more prominent. Shang-Chi is a deeper cut character from the 70s, once again capitalizing on the success of Kung Fu cinema, and specifically Bruce Lee. Shang-Chi, the master of Kung Fu, was a character who was the descendant, I believe son, of the ancient stereotype, like turn of the 20th century stereotype, Fu Manchu. And the whole thing with Shang-Chi was that he was basically like those old Kung Fu movies and the show Kung Fu specifically. It was Shang-Chi facing off against his dad and trying to take down criminal organizations using his mastery of Kung Fu. And so, rightfully, Disney and Marvel Studios decided to bring in, I don't think it's not like with Black Panther, where the entirety of the writers, where most of the writers and the director were black filmmakers. But I think this one had a bit less Asians behind the camera, but that's what I wanted to double check on. Looking at the Destin Daniel Cretton, who is they do have a director. He's Destin Daniel Cretton is a Asian director who actually this is the guy who did Just Mercy, one of my favorite movies of 2019, and The Glass Castle, the one where Brie Larson is the daughter of Matthew McConaughey, and not Matthew McConaughey. I think, is it Matthew McConaughey or is it Woody Harrelson? Woody Harrelson. And Woody Harrelson is like this mentally unstable, I think alcoholic dad who keeps taking them on the road. And it's adapted from a from a memoir that the woman wrote that Brie Larson plays. And okay, so that's good at least. And then they brought in I knew they brought in another guy, is it Lanham or Callahan? Let's see. Andrew Lanham worked with Destin Daniel Cretton on Just Mercy and Glass Castle, so the two of them must be like working partners or something. And Dave Callahan is the other one, I think. He's an Asian writer. Uh, Apparently, he wrote on America the Motion Picture for Netflix. I still need to see that. He wrote on Wonder Woman 1984 and that Jean-Claude Van Johnson show that Jean-Claude Van Damme did for Amazon. He also worked on Mortal Kombat, so this dude's all over the place. So they did that too. Okay, yeah, they got representation behind the camera as well as in front of it. But yeah, yeah, the premise here is instead of Fu Manchu, who Marvel long since lost the rights to, and nobody I think even wants the rights anymore to that because why would you? Now they have taken Shang-Chi and made him the son of basically Marvel's version of the Fu Manchu character, this evil Asian like warlord sort of mystical master character, the Mandarin. And if you remember in Iron Man 3, the Mandarin was a caricature made up into an Osama bin Laden or who's the other big one? But specifically Osama bin Laden inspired terrorist running a 10 rings criminal terrorist cell. And here it's revealed that Guy Pearce's character from Iron Man 3 co-opted all of that from this character, played by Tony Leung, Shu Wenwu. And so now he's having to rise into prominence. And there was a cute little short they made after Iron Man 3 as like a bonus feature. Because there's a point during like phases 1 and 2 where they would make these short little bonuses for the DVDs, and that would be like more backstory and more like filler stuff, like, oh, here's how some of these guys got a hold of Chitauri tech, or here's what happened to Ben Kingsley's character after the events of Iron Man 3, and they show like, oh, the actual Mandarin caught wind of his performance and decided he wanted a word. And that does come up, but I won't spoil it for you. But suffice to say that, yeah, it does reference the events of Iron Man 3. But more specifically, Shang-Chi is the story of the title character, who is the son of, they don't specifically say the Mandarin, but it's implied that, they've called him the Mandarin before. There's even a joke about it. Tony Leung is just a... Tony Leung needs to be like a Bond villain or something. The dude has charisma just oozing out of every orifice. He is just fantastic. But he has a joke that he tells Aquafina about him being called the Mandarin. And he's like, and it's like, jokes about the fact that that's in reference to like an orange or a chicken dish. It's like, oh, these Westerners are so fearful of me, yet the word they called me to terrify people was the word for orange, or what was a word that correlates to orange and chicken dishes. It's not a threatening if you are a Mandarin speaker, so to speak. And yeah, so we'll call him Wenwu. Since that's his main name in the movie, he goes by that. And he has Shang-Chi and a sister with this woman that he met during his pursuit for power, using the titular 10 rings, which used to be actual like rings that you wore on your fingers, and that they all had magical powers tied to them. Here they're like a weapon. they're like a collective weapon that you can punch with, and that can generate like blasts of energy, that they're almost magnetic in some ways, that they connect to each other using this mystical energy, and they never really go to explain it. So that's probably going to come up in future movies. But Wenwu is this this massive criminal warlord kingpin for centuries, 1,000 years, until he meets this woman and falls madly in love. And together with her, he has his two kids, Shang Chi and Xialing. And it's after the tragic death of their mother that Wenwu decides to get back into crime, and he trains his specifically Shang-Chi. He in an interesting nod, he cares not for Xialing at all, and it has that little subtle commentary on how the father cares more for the son than the daughter, even though the daughter is honestly equal to, or even in some ways even stronger than the son. But once again, it's father directly towards son, and that mindset. So there's a little subtle hint, little subtle commentary featuring that throughout the movie. But Wenwu trains Shang-Chi to be this assassin for him, but the first chance he gets, Shang-Chi runs away and goes to America and meets up with this other Chinese immigrant family in San Francisco, and befriends this girl named Katie, played by Awkwafina. We don't get a whole lot about the years between when he's there when he runs away as a teenager and when he meets Awkwafina's character, and like who he lives with or whatnot. They may save that for like a TV series or another movie or something. But basically, Shang-Chi, going under the name Sean, is friends with Awkwafina, and they basically become these sort of slacker kids who aren't really quite sure what to do with their lives. They don't have careers in mind. They don't have like goals or aspirations. They're kind of like stuck, and they don't have the drive that their parents did in order to get here, because they're already here and they don't really know what else to do now that they are here. They don't, Katie and Sean work as valet attendants, and they're just kind of chilling. They don't really care one way or the other about getting like a big, like having any kind of major goals in their lives, because they're just happy living in the moment. And it isn't until a weird, but actually from the comics character named Razor Fist, who is a fighter with a metal hand that is a sword, comes after Sean and Katie while they're on a bus, and mentions going for the pendant, and him and his henchmen mention Sean's pendant. And after the bus fight, Sean comes clean about his name not being Sean, how he came here as a teenager, and that he's been living this false life, and now his past is coming back to haunt him. From there, he goes to meet his sister. There's a couple other great fight scenes in Macau, and then eventually they end up back with Wenwu in his compound. And a lot of what's going on between the fight scenes is kind of commentary, not just on being an Asian American, especially like if you're a young first generation immigrant, or a second generation child of immigrants. This sort of clashing of ideals that you get from your old culture versus American culture, and you're not quite sure which path to follow and which one works better for you. And you have those clashing, and then, not to mention the fact that this is mainly a family drama. Like, this is specifically about Shang Chi and to a lesser extent his sister and their relationship with their father, and how he, in his grief and the loss of his wife, he became a source of abuse and mistreatment. And yet he continually acts like this loving, caring father, but it's still towards his own ends. And without giving too much away, I think at that point, I think that's all I'll really give away in terms of the plot, because they do reach a point where it involves a lot more mysticism, who their mother is, and then where she came from, and a lot. There's a lot of references to Chinese folklore that come up in the second half of the movie, especially in like the visuals. Like, there's a few shots where you see these various creatures, and they all come from Chinese mythology, and I think that's a nice reference. But I won't give away any specific details. Suffice to say that eventually, the wonderful Michelle Yeoh shows up as their auntie, and she's fantastic as always. But yeah, Simu Liu, who I had no idea actually started out as a stock photo model. He appears in a whole bunch of stock photos, and now after I think he was in Kim's Convenience. People have been mentioning. I never got the chance to watch that. I don't know about him on it, but he gets the chance to be a lead in a big budget Marvel movie, and it's good for him, honestly, because he has good charisma. He has great chemistry with Aquafina. He delivers the serious moments well, and he's a bit awkward in some spots, if only because he's still trying to. We're just getting introduced to this character, so there's some points where it's not quite perfect, but he still does very well. And Aquafina does mostly her comedic style. It's her comedic delivery and her sense of humor. So she's kind of playing in a version of herself again, which is kind of how she usually does. But like with Raya and the Last Dragon, her as Katie does delve into deeper character moments, which is different than a lot of comedic sidekicks get. And in this case, Katie, while Shang-Chi is dealing with his coming home and trying to deal with his past, Katie has never had any plans for her own future. And it's through the course of this movie that she kind of comes to terms with that and has her own little character arc, even though it's mostly in the background. Like, yeah, Awkwafina is very solid in this. The whole cast is excellent. I think it's Menger Zhang. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This is her first major motion picture, and she plays Xialing, the Shang-Chi's sister, and she is excellent. She's able to carry herself very well on screen, and I'm very curious to see what she does next, if she sticks to action or if she may do other things. Yeah, it's really excellent cast of characters. And then, of course, they do have Benedict Wong as the character Wong show up at some points. To kind of keep things tied into the Marvel universe. There's some interesting ties to the Marvel universe that come from this movie. To remind you that this is still within the Marvel universe, but a lot of the focus is still on Shang-Chi and his story. Now, the fight scenes are absolutely fantastic, and there's a lot of influence between Jackie Chan style Hong Kong kind of action movies. Specifically, the bus fight scene and the Macau fight scene, those are both very inspired by that Hong Kong style. But they're also very nice, sweeping, almost ballet-like ballet-like fight choreography, especially in the second half of the movie, and when dealing with the mother, that are very clearly wuxia inspired. Things like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or House of Flying Daggers. Those sorts of movies. And I think this is probably the best fight choreography we've seen in a Marvel movie. Oh, just period. Just because so much... I mean, that's the thing is, Marvel fights tend to be CGI driven and not very well choreographed in terms of fighting, because it's much more of a brawl. It's not very, it's pretty chaotic. Whereas here, the fight choreography has to be very precise, because you're dealing with martial arts, and that, you're dealing with particular movements, and it is almost like dance choreography. And it's very well handled. The fight choreographer for this did a fantastic job. And yeah, so the main themes we have are about abuse and family and dealing with past trauma, and that sort of plays into the story, as the movie goes along, and we learn more and more about Shang-Chi's past. And yeah, I really gotta say that, like, I also, I mean, speaking of the CGI-driven chaos, we do get that, because the climax of the movie is that, again, because that just seems to be the Marvel token, every climax has to be a CGI-driven, chaotic mess, and this is no different, and sadly, it kind of undercuts all the really good character moments that we had. It's kind of like the same issues that Falcon and the Winter Soldier and WandaVision had, where all of this great character development was going on, and then right at the end it became a chaotic mess in order to do the superhero thing of, like, explosions and CGI and all of that, and you kind of lose. I think the only Marvel thing since Endgame to really veer away from that is Loki, where they didn't go for that kind of ending. And I feel like trying to do, like, battle scenes and this sort of chaotic fight sequences kind of detracts from the rest of the movie. It feels like they had no other way to end it but this, and it feels like it feels like them being like, well, we gotta do it this way. But I feel like people wouldn't care if that was gone, and in fact, I think there were definitely some people like myself who would probably be like, oh, hey, we didn't end on this kind of thing. We didn't end on yet another CGI-driven battle scene. Hooray, It's like, oh, hey, something different for a change. But, yeah, those are, like, minor nitpicks. This movie really is... It takes a problematic character and a problematic origin and manages to make something that is a love letter to not only Chinese American and Asian American culture and, experiences, but also cinema. And you see a lot of references, if especially like action, either Hong Kong style or even wuxia style action films. If you've seen enough of them, you'll recognize a lot of techniques that they use here, and it's very much this sort of love letter to, Asian Americans and this sort of especially Chinese action filmmaking. And yeah, it really is a fantastic movie. In terms of where I put it in the MCU overall, shoot, I forgot to add it to my... Well, I might as well add it to my Letterboxd ranking list that I made. Let's see, where is my list? Here we go. I ranked the MCU tier list, I think, back when Endgame first came out. And I did include Black Widow. And... is this not all of them? Oh no, they're in chronological order. That's why. Okay, well let's add Shang Chi to this now. Okay. Save that and view the list, and let's rank these by my ratings. So, in terms of like overall, I'd probably put this right behind well shoot, my rankings are all off because it's I thought I put this list in a different order. I'll have to fix that later. But let me take a look at a different list that I have in my notes. Because I definitely ranked the MCU movies at some point. I just need to find where I ranked them. Okay, I've ranked them multiple times because they keep coming up with more. Okay, so I think the current ranking I have, I would probably put it right behind the original Avengers movie. Ooh, shoot. This is out of order. Point is, it's definitely in like the top 10. But in any case, yeah, Shang-Chi is a phenomenal movie. Given the current state of things, I won't suggest you run out to see it if you're concerned about health and safety and all that. Yeah, but if you are going to go out, make sure you mask up and make sure you play things safe. But I do recommend at some point seeing Shang-Chi, because I absolutely had a blast with it. And I do need... Okay, now let me take a look at this, because it's talking about record-breaking. Opening weekend was $90 million domestically. It basically made back its budget opening weekend by this point internationally. So yeah, Shang-Chi is definitely a success. And that's just opening weekend. I'm guessing this thing's gonna have some legs. But yeah. Meanwhile, the other movie I saw in theaters was actually about a month ago, because that's how long I've been sitting on these reviews and not actually streaming. And that is Free Guy. I saw Free Guy in theaters because I wanted to check it out. And I gotta say, it also was a very excellent film. Not as tight as Shang-Chi, but definitely an excellent action comedy. Hold on a second. Mouth is a little dry. So the premise here is, like in the trailer, you see Ryan Reynolds plays an NPC in an online video game. It's basically an online version. It's basically like GTA Online, and he is a non-player character. He's a background character in one of those kinds of games. And then at some point, he meets a player character and moves past his non-player character programming to interact with her. And he becomes he begins to develop more personality, begins to want things, desire things. But meanwhile, in the real world, the drama centers on two friends couple. They are the center of the romantic story. But these two friends who built a very indie style, like, player experience sort of game. Basically they made like if Flower had not had background characters that developed their own, that had their own algorithms to develop personalities and learn. And basically, they trying to codify artificial intelligence for a video game. And before they're able to really release it, it gets bought out by a bigger developer so that it can serve as the base, so that the programming can serve as the basis for the GTA Online style game. And so in the real world, the drama centers more on game development or the treatment of developers and the shadiness of AAA development and the executives. And then on top of that, there's also this romance story that's basically kind of there in the background until the very end. It's not very well executed. Because really, the only reason to see this movie, well, yeah, I feel comfortable saying that. The only reason to see this movie is Ryan Reynolds. Not that the movie's bad without him, but he is the driving force for this movie. He is able to play this happy-go-lucky character who finds himself continually in over his head and driven to, hook up with this woman who he doesn't even realize, he doesn't even realize the world around him is fake. He doesn't realize he's not real and that the woman he's talking to is. And it's about him coming, trying to romantically, service the romantic interest and woo and date this woman that he's fascinated with. And I think that's about as much of the plot I'm willing to give away without going into spoilers, because I don't want to spoil this either. It's been about a month, but I wouldn't want to. I feel like with this kind of thing, I feel like the best time to really dig into spoilers is for theatrical releases. Have a space set up for people who've seen it in theaters to talk about spoilers away from everybody else. But I feel like once you get into like a few months to especially a year after the home video release, that's when the spoiler cutoff should be, because by that point you've had a whole year of time from the home video release to check it out. Not everybody can go out to theaters, but people can rent things, especially now at home. So checking it out. So by the time things have come out at home, you give it like 3 months, and then by the end of a year, the spoiler thing should be cut off. I think. Especially except for like specific circumstances where you're talking to people who don't watch a lot of movies. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. Ryan Reynolds absolutely carries this movie. He carries it like a beast. He's so charismatic and funny and has this great timing in playing around in this sort of... Because that's the thing is, the people who made this movie have played online games. They know the references to make, they know the kind of humor to do, and they know the parodies to make, and it's all a blast for the most part. They have especially a couple of cameos that show up that are fun, especially the one cameo. Without going into too many spoilers, basically, somebody in the game, a player that Guy has to steal from, is played by a cameo, is revealed to be, revealed to be played by, the avatar is revealed to be a cameo, and fantastic cameo. But that isn't to say this movie is without its problems. Namely, the real world stuff is very cartoonishly written. It's very poorly written, and the actors, like even Taika Waititi, as funny and as charming as he is, he's not as fun here. He's very cartoonish, and it feels like nobody reined him in to really play a more menacing character. He's just kind of a blatant asshole. And I guess that may be the point, that he is just a blatant asshole, but I feel like if they made him, they could have made him more of an intimidating character in the movie, whereas for so much of the movie, his character is treated as a buffoon. And yeah, it's sadly, I feel like a waste of Taika's talents. Not the movie's at fault, or even Taika. It's just, some more polish in certain areas would have made it even better. And of course, there are some references to wokeness at some point. Like, there's the one point where, because that's the thing is, the two friends who developed this sort of simulation game, are a white guy and a white girl. The white guy goes on to work for Taika Waititi's developer, as basically like a moderator, and I think a debugger or something, something in the development side of things. And he works with his coworker is I believe of South Asian descent. But basically he's non-white. He's a non-white actor portraying this character. And so the non-white coworker makes a comment about how privileged the white guy is in the real world. And that's nice and all, but you did it in a movie where that white guy is still the protagonist of the real world portion of the story, and the only characters of color are the villain and the sidekick. So the movie tries to get a pass by like making a single passing comment about privilege, and yet it still continues to rely on these sort of character makeups that have been there for since the beginning of Hollywood, where the white characters are the leads and the non-white actors are the sidekicks or the villains. And it feels like a missed opportunity. Like, that's the thing. The two friends could have been any mixture of it doesn't matter who played them. It doesn't matter who played them ultimately, but if you're gonna talk about privilege and that sort of thing, you may want to make sure your ducks are all in a row, because while we're sitting here watching this, if you want to talk about that sort of thing, let's talk about that from the writing standpoint and who the character and the casting standpoint, So that's I guess that's the thing, is like, it's only a ding against the movie in that the movie itself brings it up at one point, and so you can't help but think about it. It's now that they've brought it up. Well, you're gonna bring up trying to play woke. Let's talk about woke. Let's talk about being woke. Being aware of things. So yeah, and then the romance bit is lame, and especially if they do a grand gesture reveal that's actually just really, really creepy. And the way it's described, the way it's like the girl who plays the character that Guy falls in love with in the game was also the friend who helped code this simulation game. And she's been trying to uncover, uncover the fact that Taika Waititi's character basically is using stolen code. And when the real world, when her friend, it's revealed that he did this grand gesture of love without her knowing it until now, and her reaction is like one of like realization, like, oh my god, he's been the one this whole time. When in reality, a lot of times when you see that sort of thing, it'd be more like, oh wow, you're just really, really creepy. Like, that's not romantic at all. That's genuinely creepy. That's just weird. Please stop. But yeah, once again, Hollywood tries to make creepiness attractive because it comes from hot people apparently. It's okay to be a creeper and a weirdo and in some cases abusive because at least they're hot. Thanks Hollywood. Oh Jesus. So yeah, as I've been mentioning, the story bits, the actual plot line and story elements are kind of the weakest parts. But the cast overall is fine. Is it Brian Tyree Henry who plays the best friend? Guy has this best friend who works as a security guard at the bank, and I think it's Brian Tyree Henry. No, Lil Rel Howery. Lil Rel Howery plays that best friend, and he doesn't get a whole lot of character development, but he does. But he is he and Ryan Reynolds would definitely make a good sort of buddy cop style pairing in another movie. They have good chemistry together. And hi there, Nicky Nicks. The one guy is played by Joe Keery in the real world, played by Joe Keery from Stranger Things, and the girl is played by Jodie Comer, I want to say, Comer, who I don't recognize at all. Come on, there we go. Apparently, she's in Killing Eve, and they're fine. They're all right, but once again, a lot of their problems stem from the writing. And I feel like if this had stronger writing, then it could have been even better. But for what it is, for a parody action comedy that plays up the sort of tropes of video games and whatnot, and then ties it into like actual game development issues, like it is a solid action comedy in that regard. Not like amazing, but still a fun. It's like a roller coaster. It's a fun ride while it lasts, and it's just not. It's not something you're really gonna think about beyond being fun. So, last thing I wanted to talk about today comes from Disney Plus, and that is the follow-up to Monsters Incorporated. Because Disney and Pixar did a sequel series to Monsters Incorporated, and it's not bad. It's not half bad. It's amazing. Not the best thing Disney has done with TV in a long while. It's hard to compare this to like things like the Owl House and Amphibia, which are doing amazing things over on the Disney Channel. And Monsters at Work is just kind of okay in terms of like the story and the humor and whatnot. The premise here deals with the effects of Monsters Incorporated switching from scare power to laugh power after the events of the first movie. And so John Goodman and Billy Crystal return as Mike and Sully, and they're now put in charge of Monsters Incorporated. And meanwhile, you have a fresh out of college scarer named Tyler Tuskman, who is played by somebody I didn't recognize. I didn't recognize the name here. Ben Feldman. No idea who that is. Apparently he's been in a bunch of stuff all the way back to Cloverfield. He's been on Superstore. He plays voices in the Big Hero 6 series, which explains how Disney got a hold of him. But, at any rate, Tyler is a trained scarer, and is probably one of the last of the trained scarers before this Monsters Inc. switch to laugh power. And so Tyler comes in with a handwritten, hand-signed letter from Waternoose, those crab guy from the first movie, welcoming him to Monsters Incorporated. And then he gets there, and it's like, oh, we stopped scaring. And so he's kind of stuck working in maintenance. And so, as part of the maintenance crew, you have Val, played by Mindy Kaling, who is uh, the little like two-legged uh, monster, orange monster, right behind Tyler. And Mindy's good, but once again, the main thing is kind of like supposedly they met like once in college, and then the whole thing has been Val being like, "Oh, hey, remember this time in college?" And it's a running gag that isn't all that funny, but it's fine. You've got Henry Winkler as Fritz, who is the tapier with one eye behind Mike, and he is very much the put upon, like, happy go lucky boss of a bunch of misfits. And Winkler is almost unrecognizable. I didn't recognize his voice at all throughout this whole thing. I couldn't tell you that was Henry Winkler without knowing it. And he's good. His character has a lot of fun because he's that put upon loser boss. You've got Lucas Neff, who I'm not familiar with. He plays Duncan, who is the multi-eyed green monster, who's actually like Mike's size, but I guess they're having him be up behind Tyler so you can see him. I don't know why he wouldn't be out in front because he's shorter. But yeah, he's this short, bat-winged little monster who's aiming for Fritz's job, and sees Tyler as a threat to that. Yeah, no, I haven't. Downward Dog, Fear Inc., Glitch, Marriage Story. Yeah, so I don't recognize Lucas Neff from anything. But he's good as Duncan. He is that conniving Weasley character. He's very much the what's Rainn Wilson's character from The Office? Whatever. But yeah, he's that character. He's that kind of character. And then rounding out the Miffed cast, as they're called, is veteran voice actress Alana Ubach. And she has been in all kinds of things, ranging from she was Mama Imelda in Coco. She's been in Kipo in the Age of the Wonder Beasts, Euphoria, See Dad Run, Ben 10. She's been in a bunch of Ben 10, I believe. Pound Puppies, Rango. She was in as a bunch of background characters. The Spectacular Spider-Man. Her credits go all the way back to the 90s, even. She was on Beekman's World back in the day. Yeah, I know her mainly as a voice actress. She was on Timo Supremo, Ozzy and Drix as the mayor, the little kid mayor in that show, Brandy and Mr. Whiskers, El Tigre. She was Manny Rivera in that. So, I mean, she's been a voice actress and even a camera actress for a while. And she's fantastic. And she plays this very dry, sarcastic sort of veteran character. She's the crab character in this, and her humor is very dry and very much like she's been around the block for so long that she's able to make these kind of dark jokes about people dying and things or things breaking, but she's also like complete expert in maintenance too. And she's like, all right, time for my break. She's that kind of. She's a very solid kind of trope of that character. She doesn't really get a whole lot of development, but she is a fun character to have in the background. And Alana Ubach plays her phenomenally. And so Tyler's goal, after realizing he can no longer be a scarer, is to learn how to become a jokester, which is what they're calling the monsters that go and make kids laugh. And as part of that, Billy Crystal's character, Mike Wazowski, does comedy classes to teach monsters how to be funny. And meanwhile, Mike and Sully have to deal with managing the plant now. They have to manage not only generating enough energy for the city, but also the trials and tribulations of laugh power and how it's more unreliable. And it really is an interesting sort of world building show. But the problem is the characters are not as tight. The humor is nowhere near as tight as the first movie. That movie was very much like an old school sort of buddy comedy between Mike and Sully. And here it's a lot slower. The humor is not as manic, it's not as energetic. It's a lot slower, and it feels like it's slower for the sake of kids, which is fine and all. That's perfectly fine. This could easily, like, if they're aiming for the early elementary school, post preschool, not preschool. This is definitely not preschool age sort of writing, but it is very much elementary school grade writing, and it feels very much like they're making sure things are clear enough and understandable enough for kids, and then there are still things going on that their parents would understand as well, so they can watch with them. But it's still aimed at the kids. That said, the performances are fine. The voice, I think the problem with bringing back Billy Crystal and John Goodman is it's been 20 years since the first movie, and you can hear it in their voices. They sound so much older, even though this is supposed to take place immediately after the events of the first movie, where that right when Waternoose is arrested and the plant they're worrying about the plant being shut down. For taking place right after that, you could hear the age difference in Billy and John Goodman's voices. They sound older, and I feel like this would be one of those cases where maybe you get a sound alike. Maybe you get an impressionist to do John Goodman and do Billy Crystal instead of trying to get them when they don't sound like themselves 20 years ago. Because who sounds like themselves 20 years ago? That's a long time. And you could tell the voice, the tonal difference between their voices, especially if you watch them back to back, watch the movie and then this. But like I said, these are all kind of minor nitpicks. I will say Tyler is not as well developed as a character or even that likable as a character, but he has a solid sort of focal point for the story to go between. He's a good go-between for Mike and Sully. Sully works as a mentor. They both work as mentors since Sully was a professional scarer, one of the best in the business, and Mike is now becoming the best jokester in the business. And so Sully wants to help him out the way that Waternoose helped him out, and Mike wants to help him out so that he can have more monsters generating laugh energy. And looking into that's the thing. When it delves into the inner machinations of Monsters Incorporated and shows how it actually works, it's fun. And there's a episode where Mike and Sully go to the equivalent of a baseball game, and learning these kind of aspects about the world around them is fun. It's interesting. But the overall sort of storytelling and the overall character writing feels a bit lacking. It feels like they aren't, they're kind of not really getting the energy of the first movie. But yeah, apparently the creator of this goes all the way back to Timon and Pumbaa and the 101 Dalmatians animated series. Mickey Mouse Works. The Emperor's New School. He seems to just be the standard bearer for animated Disney spin-offs, going all the way back to Timon and Pumbaa. Which I get, which actually does make sense. because this definitely feels like how Emperor's New School and Lilo and Stitch, the series, which he also worked on, kind of spun off from those movies and never quite matched what the movies were bringing, and were much clearly aimed for younger audiences and slowed down a bit. Not that they were bad, but they were definitely not the. You could tell the difference in style. But yeah, it's a Monsters at Work is a solid series. The thing about this is the animation is gorgeous. Pixar making TV animation feels weird because it's the Pixar like attention to detail and gorgeous animation work that looks film quality, and yet it's for TV. And I'm not used to that. It's kind of weird. But and I'll get into that when I talk about Doug Days, when the rest of those episodes come out. But yeah, Pixar making TV feels really weird. But at the same point, like, it's Pixar quality animation, so I'm not going to complain about it either. Yeah, that's all that I really got the chance to see. I've been really neglecting watching new films and new stuff. I've been falling so deep into the VTuber rabbit hole that I'm watching more live streams than I am watching, like, other content. And I'm not taking the time to watch, like, watch films and watch television and watch other things that I want to review. And I think I need to work on that. But yeah. Those are all the movies I wanted to talk about. So, I think I'll have to call it here. Let's head back to the main library. Yeah, I mean, I could probably go into what's been going on since I've been away, but I may want to save that for when I'm mindlessly playing through games. Suffice to say that, yeah, I'm hoping I need to start reviewing some more, and if I don't watch enough new releases and newer films within the next week, I'll probably just turn this into a regular just chatting stream and do like AMAs and talking points and whatnot, and just talk with the audience and see if I can get an audience and try and chat with them directly. Maybe talk about movies in general. Maybe we'll just have like a Q&A about movies in general or something like that. Keep it movie related without it being specifically reviews. But yeah, my voice is already starting to give way, so I think I'll call it there. And hope to get things back up and rolling, and then set up a schedule and stick to it. So thanks for tuning in, folks, and we'll see you all later.